My mother abandoned me for her new son. But when I found out she forged my signature to steal the dollar, 100K, my late father left me. I sued her, and now she's in prison. I'm 28 years old, work in digital marketing, and until recently, I thought I had already processed all the trauma from my childhood with my mother, but it turns out she had one last act of betrayal saved up for me. What happened a few months ago didn't just destroy any possibility of having a relationship with her. It basically confirmed everything I always suspected about who Suzanne, my mother, really was. I guess I should start at the beginning, when my parents got divorced, and I was like 8 years old. But the truth is, I don't remember much from that time beyond my mom crying a lot and my dad packing his stuff in silence. What I do remember is that I stayed living with my mom, and for a while it was just her and me in that house that always smelled weird, like mold mixed with that cheap perfume she wore all the time. Things changed when she met Paul. I think I was about 10 or 11. I'm not exactly sure. Paul was a contractor, a quiet guy who fixed things around the house and always brought pizza on Fridays. And honestly, at first I liked him because my mom seemed happier, or at least she stopped complaining so much about money and about my dad. They got married fast, like in less than a year, and then Noah was born when I was 12. And that's when everything really changed. Because suddenly I stopped existing to my mom. It's not like she was mean to me in an obvious way, you know? She didn't hit me or anything dramatic, but it was just like I was a piece of furniture in the house, something that was there but didn't require attention. Everything revolved around Noah, the perfect baby, the son from her perfect new marriage, and I was just the daughter from the previous marriage who reminded her of my dad. Weeks would go by where my mom basically didn't talk to me beyond what was necessary, like pass me the milk or clean your room, and I got used to being invisible in my own house. Paul tried to include me sometimes. He'd ask me how school was going or if I wanted to go with them to the park with Noah. But my mom always found an excuse for me to stay home, like I had homework or I should rest. The truth is, I think she wanted to erase me from her perfect new life, like I was a mistake from the past that didn't fit into her revised story. Meanwhile, my dad, Richard, visited me every 2 weeks and took me out to eat or to the movies, and those were basically the only times I felt important to someone. He always asked how I was, how my mom treated me, if I needed anything, and I always told him everything was fine because I didn't want to be a burden. You know what I mean? Everything exploded when I was 17. I got home early one day because they canceled volleyball practice. I think it was a Tuesday or Wednesday. And when I went in, I saw my mom's car in the driveway, but there was also another car I didn't recognize. A kind of old blue Mazda. I didn't think much of it. Like maybe it was a friend of Paul's or something. But when I went upstairs, I heard voices in my mom's room, and one of those voices was definitely not Paul's. I just stood there in the hallway like an idiot, with my backpack still on my shoulder, and I could hear laughter and other sounds that, I don't need to describe. I felt like someone had thrown ice water on me, and the worst part wasn't just that my mom was cheating on Paul, but that Noah was at daycare, and she had taken advantage of that time to bring this guy to the house. I didn't confront my mom that day. I just went to my room and put on my headphones. And when she came down like 2 hours later, she acted like nothing happened, asked me if I had eaten, and told me to heat up the leftovers in the fridge. I held it in for like 3 weeks without saying anything, but it was eating me alive inside because Paul was a good person, like really was a good guy who didn't deserve this. And I watched my mom acting like the perfect wife every night while I knew the truth. One night during dinner, with Paul, talking about a construction project and Noah making a mess with his food, I just blurted it out. I told my mom I knew what she was doing, that I had seen the blue car and that I heard voices in her room, and she looked at me with a face I'll never forget, like half surprise, half absolute fury. Paul stopped eating and asked what I was talking about, and my mom, Susan, it's hard for me to even call her mom now, honestly, got up from the table and grabbed my arm so hard she left marks. She dragged me to my room and started yelling at me, saying I was a liar, that I was making things up to ruin her marriage because I was jealous of her happiness, that I had always been a problematic child, like my father. I told her I had seen the car, that I had heard everything, and she let go of my arm and told me that if I opened my mouth again, I was going to regret it. I called my dad that night, crying so hard I could barely speak, and I told him everything. About the cheating, about Susan grabbing my arm, about how she had basically threatened me. My dad was furious, like I had never heard him that angry, and he told me to pack my things, that he was coming for me. He arrived like at 11 at night, knocked on the door, and when Susan opened it, he told her he was taking me with him, that this was over. She started with her theatrics, crying and saying I was a rebellious teenager who was lying, that I wanted to live with him because he was more permissive, but my dad didn't even respond to her. He just went up to my room and helped me put my clothes in 2 big suitcases. Susan followed us, yelling all the way to the car, saying this was a mistake, that I was going to regret it, that she was my mother and had rights, but my dad just put me in the car and we left. Living with my dad was like being able to breathe for the first time in years. He had a 2-bedroom apartment on the other side of town, nothing fancy but clean and quiet. And from day one, he made it clear that this was my home too. He'd ask me what I wanted for dinner. He'd help me with my calculus homework, even though he didn't understand advanced math at all. And on weekends, we'd watch bad movies and eat popcorn. I finished high school living with him, and it was the best year and a half of my adolescence, honestly. Susan tried to call me a couple times at first. She'd leave voicemails crying and saying to forgive her, that she only wanted what was best for me, but I never answered her. Paul also called me once, like 6 months after I left, and asked me if what I had said that night was true, and I told him yes, that I was very sorry. He didn't say anything for a few seconds and then just said thank you for telling me the truth and hung up. I don't know what happened after that call. If he confronted Susan or just decided to ignore it. I never knew until much later. During my last year of high school, my dad surprised me one day. He took me to see a small apartment like 20 minutes from his place. It was a tiny place, like a studio with 1 bedroom. Nothing special but in good condition. And he told me he had been saving and wanted to buy it for me for when I started college, so I'd have my own space but be close to him if I needed anything. I cried like a baby, literally, because no one had ever done something like that for me. And he hugged me and told me I deserved it, that I had been through a lot and he wanted to make sure I was okay. There was a kind of complicated legal problem with the apartment paperwork, because technically I was still a minor, and because of custody laws, Susan had to sign some documents too, which was a whole drama. My dad had to contact her and basically beg her to sign, and she only agreed after he paid her an amount of money. He never told me how much, but I know it was quite a bit. The apartment was registered with Susan's name on some of the papers, but with the legal clarification that it was mine. My dad made sure of that with his lawyer, and we finally got it when I turned 18. I started college studying marketing, got a part-time job at a coffee shop to pay my expenses, and things were going well, you know? My dad and I had dinner together at least twice a week. He was proud of me, and I finally felt like my life was in a good place. But then everything went to hell when my dad started feeling sick. At first, we thought it was the flu or something normal, but he wasn't getting better, and after a bunch of doctor's appointments and tests and all that shit, they diagnosed him with pancreatic cancer. He was 58 years old, which seemed young to me. Too young for something like that. The next few months were a nightmare of chemotherapies and hospitals and watching him deteriorate every day, and I tried to be with him as much as possible between classes and work. Susan showed up at the hospital once, when he was already very bad, and had the nerve to cry and say she was very sorry, that they had had good times, together. And my dad was so weak he just nodded. I pulled her out of the room and told her to leave, that she had no right to be there after everything she had done, and she looked at me with that victim face she always put on and left without saying anything else. My dad died on a Tuesday early in the morning. I was holding his hand when it happened, and I swear a part of me died with him that day. He was the most important person in my life, the only one who really loved me unconditionally, and suddenly he wasn't there. The funeral was small. Some friends of his from work, a couple of distant cousins, and me. Susan didn't show up, which honestly was a relief, because I don't think I could have handled seeing her there pretending she cared. After the funeral, my dad's lawyer contacted me about the will, and it turned out he had left me everything little he had. His savings, like $15,000, his car, a kind of beat-up 2015 Honda Accord, and above all, he legally confirmed that the apartment was completely mine now. The papers were updated, Susan's name was removed from everything, and I became the sole official owner of the apartment my dad had given me. Like 3 years went by without having any contact with Susan. I finished my degree, got a decent job at a digital marketing agency, and basically went on with my life trying not to think about her. I had rented out the apartment to a young couple because the truth is I didn't need that space. I was living somewhere else closer to my work, and the rent money was good for saving. Everything was going smoothly until like 8 months ago Susan contacted me out of nowhere, She sent me a text message saying she needed to talk to me, that it was important, to please give her a chance. Part of me wanted to ignore her completely, but another part, I don't know. I guess there was still a stupid part of me that wanted to believe that maybe she had changed. That maybe after all these years we could have some kind of relationship. We agreed to meet at a neutral cafe, and when I got there, she was already there. She looked older. She was like 52 at that time, and you could see the wrinkles and the gray hair she was trying to cover with dye. She hugged me like we were close mother and daughter, which made me feel super uncomfortable. And she started with all the talk about how much she missed me, how she had been thinking about me, how she regretted everything that had happened between us. We were there for like half an hour with that superficial conversation until she finally got to the real point of why she wanted to see me. Turns out Noah, my half-brother who was now like 16, wanted to go to college and she needed money for tuition and expenses. She asked if I could lend her, or rather give her, like $20,000 to help with Noah's education. I told her I didn't have that kind of money available, that I also had my own debts and expenses. And she got kind of insistent, saying I had a good job, that surely I could get a loan, that it was for my brother, for family. I told her I'd think about it, basically to end the conversation, and we said goodbye with her, saying she'd call me soon to know my answer. I had no intention of giving her money, honestly, not after everything. But I also didn't want a conflict at that moment, you know what I mean? Like 2 months after that cafe meeting, I received a certified letter at my house, one of those you have to sign to receive, and when I opened it, it was an eviction notice for the couple renting my apartment. I stood there reading the letter like 5 times, not understanding what the hell was going on, because I hadn't sent any eviction notice. I wasn't even thinking about selling the apartment. I called the number on the letter and a real estate agent answered, and she explained that the apartment had been sold recently and that the new owner needed the tenants to vacate in 30 days. I told her there was a mistake, that I was the owner of the apartment and I hadn't sold it, and there was a long silence on the other end of the line before she said that according to the documents she had, the apartment had been legally sold 3 weeks ago, with all the necessary signatures and all the paperwork in order. I felt like the floor was moving under my feet. I asked the agent to send me copies of all the sale documents by email, and when I received them and reviewed them, there it was, my signature on the sale papers. I mean, it wasn't my signature. I had never signed those papers, but there was a signature that looked enough like mine to fool someone who didn't know it well. And there, in the documents, was the name of the seller, Susan Miller, with an authorization supposedly signed by me allowing her to sell the property in my name. That bitch had forged my signature and sold my apartment, the apartment my dad had given me, without my permission. I sat on the floor of my living, the room with all those papers scattered around, and I couldn't even cry. I just felt this cold rage filling my chest. I confronted her the next day, went straight to her house without warning, knocked on the door like crazy until she opened, and I yelled at her, what the hell had she done? Susan didn't even try to deny it, literally just shrugged and told me she needed the money for Noah. That college was expensive, that I wasn't using the apartment anyway, so what did it matter? I told her she had forged my signature, that that was a crime, fraud, and she had the nerve to tell me that technically her name had been on the original papers, that she had as much right as I did to the apartment. I yelled at her that she was crazy, that my dad had given it to me, that the final documents only had my name after he died, and she just kept justifying herself, saying it was for family, that Noah was my brother and I should be happy to help him. Paul arrived in the middle of our fight, asked what was going on, and when I told him that Susan had sold my property without permission, he went pale. He didn't know anything about this. That was clear from his reaction, and he asked Susan if it was true, and she started with her theatrics again, crying and saying she had done what she had to do for her son. I left that house knowing this wasn't going to end with a simple argument. I hired a lawyer the next day, showed him all the documents, explained the whole situation, and he told me I had a solid case of fraud and forgery, that Susan could face criminal charges for this. We filed a formal lawsuit, included all the evidence, the documents with the forged signature, the testimonies of the couple renting the apartment, the bank records showing that the money from the sale went into an account in Susan's name, everything. The legal process was exhausting. It lasted like 6 months of hearings and statements and more papers than I had seen in my life. Susan hired her own lawyer who tried to argue that it had been a misunderstanding, that she believed she had authorization to sell because her name had been on the original papers. Basically pure legal garbage trying to save her. During the trial, I had to sit there and listen to Susan cry in front of the judge, saying she was very sorry, that she just wanted to help her son, that she had made a terrible mistake but didn't deserve to go to jail. Her lawyer brought Noah to testify. Poor kid was like 17 at that time and looked super uncomfortable, and he had to say yes, that his mom had used the money from the sale to pay for his first year of college, although he didn't know the money came from fraud. I testified about our whole history, about how she had treated me as a child, about the cheating on Paul, about how she had emotionally abandoned me. And yeah, maybe not all of that was legally relevant, but I wanted it on record. I wanted someone else to know who Susan really was. The judge listened to everything, reviewed all the evidence, and in the end gave his verdict. Susan was guilty of fraud and document forgery. The sentence was 2 years in prison. Not much considering what she had done, but something was something. After the verdict, before they took her away, Susan tried to approach me. She said, "Please forgive me. I did it for Noah. You don't understand what it's like to be a mother." And I just told her she was right. That I didn't understand, because a real mother wouldn't have done what she did to me my whole life. They took her away crying, and I just stood there in that courthouse with my lawyer, feeling empty more than victorious. You know? I didn't feel joy that she was going to prison. I just felt tired of all this shit. Paul contacted me that same night, asked me to meet him, and when I did, I told him something I had kept all these years. I told him about the cheating I had seen when I was 17, about the blue car and the voices in the room, about how Susan had threatened me when I mentioned it. He was quiet for a long time, looking at his coffee, getting cold on the table, and then he told me, "Thank you." I think I always suspected it, but never wanted to believe it. He told me he was going to file for divorce, that he couldn't stay married to someone like that, and honestly, I completely understood. The money from the apartment sale was eventually returned to me after the court ordered the transaction to be reversed. It was like $100,000 in total because prices had gone up since my dad bought it. With that money, I bought my own house. Nothing huge, but it's mine. Completely mine. In a quiet neighborhood far from all this craziness. I'm furnishing it little by little, trying to make a space that feels like a fresh start, I guess. Susan will get out of prison in like a year and a half if she has good behavior. And honestly, I don't know what I'm going to do when that happens. Probably nothing. Probably just keep having no contact with her like I've been doing. Noah sent me a message a few months ago, apologizing for everything, even though he wasn't at fault for anything, saying he understood if I didn't want to know anything about him either. But I replied that he was innocent in all this, that he had nothing to do with his mother's actions. We don't have a close relationship. Honestly, I don't know if we ever will, but at least I don't feel anger toward him. Sometimes I sit in the living room of my new house, drinking coffee in the morning, and I think about all this. About how my own mother was capable of stealing the only valuable thing my dad left me. And it still doesn't feel real. I thought I had already processed my relationship with her, that I had already accepted she wasn't a good mother. But this was a completely different level. I don't know if I'll ever forgive her. Probably not. And that's okay. I think it's okay not to forgive certain things. Paul officially divorced Susan like 3 months ago. He told me when we met for coffee, and he said he should have believed me from the beginning when I told him about the cheating years ago. I told him he didn't need to apologize, that I understood it's hard to believe something like that about someone you love. The last time I knew anything about Susan was through Noah, who told me she was taking classes in prison, trying to get good behavior to get out early, and that she had said she wanted to talk to me when she got out to explain herself. Honestly, I don't know if I'm going to give her that opportunity. I don't owe her anything, and maybe it's better this way. Leave everything buried and move on with my life without her in any capacity. I'm in therapy now, working on all this with a psychologist who helps me process not just the fraud but my whole childhood and the relationship with my mother. It's weird to talk about these things out loud with someone, but it's helping, I think.